In our video this week, I will review and critique design work sent to us by our students from China. We are proud to have such an amazing follower base there who are keen to study and improving their skills. I am going to review 20 designs from 3 different competitions, and I will explain what makes some of them better than others and how to improve them. Okay, so this first project was the music festival poster, and the brief was very simple. The students had to use a gradient map adjustment layer on the main image in the composition and make sure that they use 2 typefaces. So do a good pairing of 2 different fonts. So let's see how this worked out. And for those who don't use the gradient map adjustment, I just would like to show you very quickly how it works. So in Photoshop, you go into the adjustment layers, select gradient map, and then you pick 2 colors that will be applied to the shadows and the highlights. Like this one is a good example where we have a purple shadow tint and an orange highlight tint. It's basically a duotone effect, but you can obviously vary these colors. So if I select the highlight color, we can change it to whatever we want. So I can just go into any of these colors, pick them, and then you can see how it's going to change the whole design. And of course, we can also adjust these so we can decide where these colors will be mapped onto the tonal range of the image that we are working with. So before and after, it's a quite nice effect and also helps to add text on top of the image. So it usually simplifies the image because it gets rid of all the additional colors. So it sets a good background image or backdrop on which we can apply our text. So these are all the designs that we received. So all the submissions from our students in China. And the one that I selected as the winner is on the left. And then we will work our way through all of them until we get to the ones that are least successful. And it is always a good way to learn about composition, no matter whether we are looking at good designs or less successful ones. So as I said, let's start with this one here on the left. I'm just going to zoom a bit closer. And by the way, whenever you have a very big canvas open in Photoshop, you can always use the shortcut, press down H on the keyboard, click and hold. And then this is called the bird's eye view, by the way. You can very quickly move to another image like here, and then we can continue reviewing it. So I just thought that it's useful to mention. It's similar to the hand tool, but it's for panning within the whole canvas very quickly and immediately getting back to the same zoom that you had before. First of all, I love the visual balance and symmetry in this composition, and starting off with this spine in the middle. So the title is really nicely positioned here in the middle, and it's a cool technique to use both the English and the Chinese text in one. Although some of these very tiny texts here in the background might be a bit too much. As you can see, if I zoom closer, it repeats the words which we can see there, like style. That might be a little bit over the top, but in general, the idea is really nice. And I like that how it solidifies that center part of the image and also attracts the eye to the center point, which is here. Also, this is strengthened further by using that additional color that we have there. So the gradient map in this case creates this nice dark purple effect, and the only additional color, that magenta, used here in the middle. And also I think on these rings here. Now the rings are also really nice. They are fading out. And again, this is something that leads the eye towards the center. No matter where you are coming from, these circles will lead your eye to the center, which is the focus point where the guitar is and also where the title is. So that works really well. And of course, these circles can be interpreted as sound waves, which works really well with the aspect or the theme music in this case. Having that spine, the center element, is great, but we also have this nice diagonal line, the guitar itself, which breaks up the symmetry and adds a bit more momentum and dynamism to the composition. So that's really well used there. And if we zoom closer, you can see that it is actually in front of these circles, but behind the sound waves. So that's a little bit of a play on depth, which works well, again, I think. The secondary text we have on both sides. So we have one here on the left side. Actually, it goes down to here, and then we have the other secondary text here on the right. It creates another dynamic angle, which we can place down like this. Again, it balances out the line of the guitar quite well. And the only main concern for me is that the two fonts used are quite similar. So this is font number 1 and that is font number 2. They are not that different from each other. So I would make sure that the fonts are not clashing. So when you're pairing fonts, this is something you really have to pay attention to. Also, I'm not sure whether we need this divider here because we have enough distance between the two elements. So there's no need for a divider there. Also, this is unnecessary, I think. I'm not sure what's the actual purpose of this dash line here. Because we already have a white frame as a border, you don't want to add too many framing devices because that just gets over the top. But overall, brilliant design, and it's deserved to be the winner for this project. But let's go on to the runner-ups and go through very quickly how these can be improved. First of all, here again, the combination of the typefaces I'm not really keen on. So we have a very good font selected for the title. And we have a font that is very different in this case, but it just doesn't really work with the composition. So this font here, which is used as the secondary font or tagline, is very out of place. It doesn't really work with this strong, solid border and more geometric shape around it. And also, I don't think it's strong enough here at the bottom. So it's the same font, or maybe even that one is a different font. Again, doesn't really work in the composition. It's too decorative, too much curves on it. We also have a third font here at the bottom, which is much easier to read. But again, it is a little bit too similar to the main primary type. So once again, the pairing didn't work really well here, but the general composition I like, especially the out of bounds effect here. So the hand and the guitar coming out of the frame, that is a really nice touch. Also, the color choice for the gradient map works nicely, creating this summer mood and vibe. But there's another thing I would mention here just very quickly. Avoid typos, especially in your main text if you are doing submissions for competitions. Even if it's a simple brief without any copy, you still should pay attention to it. So that's just one quick point there. Now let's move on to the next runner-up. Here again, we have a really cool composition using a triangular shape, which I really like. And also it has a lot of momentum and it's very dynamic. I like the colors as well and the effects used, but the weak point again is the typography. So there's a couple of things that I would definitely avoid. So the word music, for example, is distorted in a very uncomfortable way here on the top. So maybe if we have the word removed from here, so completely get rid of music there, and also get rid of this here, instead of that have the music written here, summer music, then we could always have the festival written somewhere else, maybe here at the bottom, although it might be a little bit too far away. So I understand why these three were here on the top together, but that distortion is 2/4, so I would avoid doing it that way. But that's just one of the issues that I have with the type. The other one is, again, the use of fonts. So we have clearly one font up here, that's 1. Then we have another font here, that's 2. And then we have a third font here. Now, it's not a problem to use more than 2 typefaces, but again, the more typefaces you use, the less synchronized they will be, or the whole composition will start to be a bit too complex unnecessarily. So instead of using so many different typefaces, it's usually good to use one that has so many different variations, so they still will be in the same family, but they just give you a range to work with. So you could have like a condensed one that's used here on the title. You can have a bold one that you can use here, and then you can use a lighter one for the secondary text. But if you are using multiple typefaces, then you have to somehow make them work well together. So not to make them too similar, but make sure that they are in harmony and working well together. So I feel like in this case, the text enjoy is actually quite good. that font is almost feels like it's drawn, and maybe it is. I'm not sure whether the student actually used the font or it's actually hand drawn, but that is quite cool. I like the way how playful it is, and that could be used also for the secondary text, the Summer Music Festival, easily. And then I would be already much happier with the type used in the composition. Maybe one additional thing I would mention is that this detail here at the bottom is an important part of the composition because it gives the date and the location. And I like the way it's another block, so it kept together. Even that sound wave is connecting it all together into one block. If that's an important information, I would probably increase the size of the date and the place. So instead of stating these big, you can just have the same size used for the information itself, and you don't necessarily need to write date and location, or if you do them, those can be smaller. So the actual information is more important than the category that they are in. Okay, and let's move on to our third runner-up, which I also really like. So here we have a very nice treatment again with the gradient map on the main image, and it works really well in general. So the colors used, we have this bright blue or cyan, we have this nice peach color, then we have the purple in the background, and they work really nicely together. So the color theme is spot on, I feel, in this composition. And I also like the way blending is used. So on these circles, some of them have blending, so they are blended onto the image behind. We also have these circles again. In this case, they look like the path of the planets, which is quite nice as well. But once again, because it's music related, we can also think of sound waves. But the weakness of this poster, apart from the obvious typo that we can see up here, is the font again. And that seems to be the most tricky part of this student work, because I can see two really good options here. Like this one here, Imagine. I really like this font, and I think it could work as the main title. So the legend could have been written with that font, and I think it would have looked much more interesting. And then instead of this very standard font currently used for music festival, we could have seen maybe the one that used here at the bottom, John Lennon. So a very thin single line font used there. So that would create a very nice combination. So as I said in the previous examples, especially here in the runner-ups, font choices and the pairing was the weakest, but this is a nice pairing here. So they are different enough. One of them is more handwritten. The other one is a very structured font. They have very different weight. The first one is very bulky or heavy. The other one is very light. High contrast between the two typefaces creates a good pairing. And I really wanted to make sure I show this, even though it's not used in the right way or in the right place, but this poster has potential to nail the typefaces. So only if these two typefaces are used here, that's already would have made it much better and look much more professional. And maybe just one additional thing I wanted to mention is this detail here, I think makes it really good. So let me just pick a color and show it better here. So this selection of the hair, obviously not perfect, but it makes it look more like an illustration. Having that orange or peach color behind the hair creates a really nice effect, and it just brings everything together. So adds depth, adds contrast, and it works really nicely. So that's one of the highlights, I would say, in this composition. So this next category I called good concepts, which means that they have potential still, but there's a little bit more design decisions off here compared to the runner-ups. So let's take a look at this one maybe first, the Beat It Michael Jackson poster. Now here, the big problem again is the choice of fonts. We have 1, 2, 3 obviously, because it's a different language, then 4, and it's hardly visible again on this text, but yeah, that's 4 and 5, and that's, I think, is all. But then again, we have also this very strong treatment on this text and reflection here at the bottom, and then we have this offset here on the top. So strong treatments on text is not a problem, but so many different effects all in one, it starts to look a bit cheap and overcooked. So I would recommend to stick to one and just using it only on the most important elements. So maybe if we use the neon effect, we can use that on the title, or if we use the offset that's currently used there, maybe use it a bit more in a subtle way. Or if we want to use reflection, again, just use that once and don't overuse it. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you actually like this, all kinds of different effects in one. I would recommend not to go down this route most of the time, but it depends on the direction you want to take. So that's one of the issues that I have here. Apart from that, I love what's happening here. So this stylized illustrative design on the photo or treatment on the photo works really well, especially all these splashes, and it's done nicely. This is maybe a little bit too much here at the bottom, but it's still good and I can see the gradient map used there. I would say the biggest problem though is the fact that the title is getting lost. So it's a little bit too similar in colors here and it starts to blend into the background, but also that we have too many different placements of text and also alignment issues. Like here, for example, if you have a block of text that you place here, you don't want to have alignments done differently. So you have two very close alignments. It feels like a mistake. That's something you want to pay attention to. I would have also moved the title a bit further down, keep it somewhere in the middle, and that way you would have three main blocks. So have the title in the middle and have additional details maybe a little bit further down here on the left. So that's the second block that we have, and then the third block on the right. So try not to divide your information too much. And again, think of the hierarchy. What's most important, then second and third. So if the most important element is in the middle, that's obviously going to attract the eye. People will read that and then move on to whatever is second and third importance. Alright, so let's move on to these other two designs. I have them side by side. They are very different, but I'm just going to run through them quickly. We have a strong symmetrical design here on the left, which works nicely. And this one is almost completely symmetrical, which is still not a problem. My concern is that it's a little bit too dark. So the information jumps off the poster, which is good. So on dark background, white text, very legible, but the rest of the design and all the graphics are really dark, apart from the X in the middle. So is that X that important? Or it actually would have been better to have the faces in those two colors, maybe the yellow and the red, or just turn them white just to make them a little bit more stand out. And maybe even the guitar can be white or a different color, highlight color. It might be a little bit too much detail to be highlighted, but at the moment, things are just getting a little bit lost. That's my overall impression of the poster, that it's a bit too dark. Now, on the right side, we have a very nice treatment of going with the retro theme. So the colors, again, the gradient map works really well here. And the font choices are actually really good here. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's actually a quite nice treatment. I like how the cello is coming in front of the title as well. That works well. My biggest problem here are these musical notes working as framing devices. That is just not working with the rest of the design. So if we are going for the retro theme, this is just really out of place. If you want to use the musical notes, you can, but I wouldn't put anything inside them. Especially like the way it works currently, it's really hard to see what's inside them. I can see Bowie, I can see Beatles, and I'm not sure what this is. So you want to stay true to whatever style you are targeting. In this case, the retro theme. So simply by removing those would have already improved the general design. And the last category that I have, which I call needs more work, is where things are a bit even more off. So let's just start with this one here, Starry Sky Summer Music Festival. I don't want to dishearten the student who worked on this, or any of these work that I put in this category, because it's still a good start and there are some elements that work well. But the biggest problem here in general is that there's just too much things going on. So we have a highly distorted text, first of all. This one is just too much distorted. We have an effect on it. Again, like an offset effect, which is not necessary, especially with this thin text. it's just very confusing. We have the gradient map used in the background, which is actually quite nice. I like the colors used. It works with the starry sky title, so that's actually really good. But then the colors used for these rings are really off. They are not following the theme, so that's something I would definitely change. Even if you just keep them white, would have been already much better, but at the moment it's just not going with the theme. Like these red colors here, these blends actually could work. So if that was used instead of these orange and blue or dark purple colors, it would have worked much better. Also, another problem is I'm not sure which one is supposed to be the title. So we have the same Starry Sky, sing the same song, Starry Sky Summer Music Festival. I'm guessing the one on the top is supposed to be the tagline or the secondary text, but because it is so big and because it's on the top, that's the first thing that I would read. The placement and size of your secondary text is very important. So if this was made smaller, so at the moment it's huge, if it was something maybe just a size like that, I would immediately be able to tell that it is a secondary text. So just pay attention to scale, position, and again the hierarchy of your text. If these things are fixed, it would already be a much better design. Similar issues we have here. It's a lot of things are clashing, and gradient map can be a very intrusive effect, something that really makes a strange result, especially when you use bright colors on the shadows and dark colors on the highlights. That's basically creating an inverted effect. Now, sometimes you might want to do that and creating like a heat map style image. I can actually see that it's about cold-blooded animal. Then it's a quite cool take on the gradient map, or cool way of using it, but I still feel like it's a bit over the top and it's not a pleasing result. So even if you are doing an effect like that, you want to do it in a stylish way. Even if we just get rid of the greens in the image and just tone down the effect a bit, it might work much better already. And apart from that, I actually think the text is really cool. Like this text here works really well. This is really nice as well. So it could actually be a very good composition, but because the image is so overpowering and very intrusive and strong, it just puts me off from looking at this design. And just a quick mention of this last one in this category. I think this one is just weak because there's not much thought put into it. We have a very strong clash between the main type and the image behind it. Again, the font is not really working. It's more like a military type font or industrial type font, but this doesn't work with the rock theme, in my opinion. And then we have a secondary font here on the top, which is not the same as the font used at the bottom. So there's no connection between them. And again, the pairing of the fonts is off. But apart from that, just to say one positive aspect is the gradient map, which is used in a subtle way. So it's used more around the edges than on the face. So the face is still in colors while the rest of the image is going further into the gradient map. So it's most likely a mask that was used here, a layer mask for the gradient map adjustment layer, which actually does a good job. So even though I'm saying these are the least successful designs, there's obviously good ideas and good directions there, which can be further improved and developed to make them successful. So all of these has the potential, has some good ideas, but these are the things that I would recommend to look into and improve. So hopefully you found this useful so far. And we have 2 additional competitions that I'm just going to very quickly review because I don't want to repeat the same mistakes. Instead, I'm just going to highlight what are the problems and what are the good aspects of each design. Second competition was the winter themed postcard. We have less submissions here, so it was a little bit easier to put them in the order following the previous review. So here the brief was to use a repeat pattern somewhere within the design using Adobe Illustrator, and then also to use at least one word or phrase which has a good kerning on it. That's not that difficult to do, but what's more important is really how to incorporate a pattern in a general composition. So as the most successful design, I selected this one, and I love the story behind it. The student who submitted this explained that there was a quite sad story where a snowman was completely destroyed overnight. It was just lying in the snow in the morning, and the student was really sad. But then the older brother explained that it's probably just sleeping, so don't worry, it's not that sad. So that's quite a nice emotional story behind the composition. I love the way that we have a cute illustration here in the middle, and then a pattern is used in a very subtle way in the background. That just works really well. Also, the way the white and the blue colors are used and have this noise texture creating an edge between them. Maybe only one thing is that I would probably have the text a little bit more stand out. Currently, it just blends a little bit too much into the background. In the next category, we have a really nice pattern in the background, but we have a little bit weak central part, especially because of the selected fonts. So again, the font choices are weakening the overall composition. Plus also, I feel like the design in the middle doesn't stand out enough from the pattern. So if this is supposed to be a highlighted design, it shouldn't reuse the elements from the pattern. I know it's a lot of work to draw the pattern and all the elements, but if you pick a central element, you should make it into a hero design asset or just a feature that you really want to make sure it stands out from the rest of the pattern. With this other design, my main concern is that the text here, Happy Spring Festival, is just difficult to read, so it doesn't fit in the design. If you ever have this issue, just have like a ribbon or something that's filled with a color that can add a block behind the text so it can be legible. And the other thing is that I find the cropping a little bit weird. Also, I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. Is this a bridge? Is this a gift or a box or something? I can't really read it. And apart from that, it's a really nice color theme, and also the pattern in the background is nice. Although again, I'm not sure whether it's necessary to have these strong black outlines on these snowflakes. They could probably work a little bit in a more subtle way. The most distracting elements are these here on the bottom, which I'm not sure again whether that's a letter I or whether that's part of the bridge or the box. I just can't read this composition well. So the style itself is nice, but it's just too complex or complicated or just doesn't read well. So whenever you try to show something as part of your composition, make sure it is clear and reads well. In this composition, I feel like, first of all, the pattern itself shouldn't have text in it. So within the pattern, we have text already if there is additional text used. So you can always create multiple patterns, one which has text in it, one which doesn't. And then whenever you use it, you apply the corresponding pattern or the pattern that works in that composition. So here I wouldn't include text because we have our title and secondary text included. And the other issue that I have is because we already have a frame here, this pattern is chopped off and forms a frame on its own. Now, the pattern I think would work much better if it goes all the way to the edge. So just scale it up and go it all the way to the edge, or maybe completely get rid of this frame and then just let the pattern finish itself here in the middle. So make sure that nothing is getting cropped off from it. Here on the right, we have the least successful submissions for this brief. Main issue with the one on the top is that it's just extremely busy, and especially these strong black lines running along on the top. I know that it tries to show the busy city life, but it is just not a pleasing result. It's not something I want to look at. And also the font choice and the placement of it and the color of it, again, it's just out of place and doesn't work well with the rest of the composition. So there's value in this design and the work that's put into it. I can see that there is still potential, like these elements used or illustrations created here at the bottom could actually work really well in a pattern instead of this big clutter that we have here. The biggest problem with the design here at the bottom are the colors used. So they are not in harmony. They are just all over the place. So we have very bright yellow, we have this pink color, then we have green, then we have blue in the background. So they are just not in harmony and not working well. So I think if simply just the colors are improved, it would already work better, because there's a nice even spreading of the pattern elements. And also I quite like the background with the rolling hills and snow on them. So just simply tweaking the colors would work, but also there's additional issues with the text that I don't want to go into more detail because we already talked about it. And last but not least, just a very quick one, because there's only 3 submissions here. We had the farmers market logo design, where we asked as the brief to have a circular text used in the composition and also to have like a framing device for the logo. So the most successful one is clearly this one out of the 3 of them. The main reason for this is because it has a nice font choice. So we have one of the fonts and then the other font working well together as a pair. So this is a successful pairing for the typeface. And even the third font works well on the outline, so there's no clashing between them. They are different enough from each other, but they form a nice unit together. The only thing that I would improve here is to move the word market slightly to the right. So I would just shift it a bit further to right, because there's quite a big empty space here. If I remove my arrows, you can see this big empty space here. And also there is almost like a tangent here between the M and the chili or paprika at the bottom. So that's something that I would make sure is not happening. So that point there is probably something I would fix. And maybe one additional thing is that here at the bottom, we have an upside down text. So whenever you are doing this, if you have text running along a circle, you have to make sure at the bottom it doesn't read upside down. So to fix this in Illustrator, you have to make sure that this text is on a separate circle and the direction for the text is going to be left to right instead of right to left. So you just have to use an additional circle. That's how quickly you can fix it. The other design, Uncle Owen's Farmer's Market, is really cool. It's very modern, and I like how the broccoli or whatever vegetable this is combined with the glasses and the mustache, which I guess stands for uncle. So it's a nice design and I like it. It's simple, it's modern. The only issue I have here is that it might feel a little bit too modern for a farmer's market. So it feels a little bit more corporate or like a creative agency's logos than an actual farmer's market. And lastly, this submission is definitely the weakest. Again, there's not enough thought put into choosing the type, and the actual design itself has too much empty space or negative space. The central element is too small and it doesn't really read well. So we have a drop, probably water, and then a plant. But then again, we have a couple of unnecessary details, which I'm not sure what they represent. This might be the sun or something else, but it's a little bit too complicated for whatever it wants to show. So a simple drop of water and a plant or seed combined together could work in a much simpler and more effective way if it's done in the right balance and the right style. What I like are the lines in the background, those subtle indication of fields. So that actually works really well in the background, but everything else needs more work and refinement. So once again, here are the 3 winning designs side by side from the 3 competitions, and congratulations to the students who submitted them. Well done for everyone who took part in these competitions, and congrats for the winners. Click on the link in the description to become a member if you want to send us your designs and get them reviewed by me and my team. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.